I want to just say hi to everybody and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Adam Beresin from MS Dynamics World. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for today's event, Transforming Your Dynamics GP Experience with AP Automation and Expense Management. Our presenter today is Mary Miller from Imagetag. We're very happy to have Mary here with us today. A quick note, you can actually submit any questions you have during the session through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen, and Mary's going to try to get to all of them at the end of the event. So without further delay, I'm going to pass it over to you, Mary.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be with you and having a quick conversation about how you can transform your business with AP automation and expense management, and we can certainly cover some additional use cases as well, because the important thing to know as you begin the digital transformation journey within your organization is that once you find one area of improvement, it's often sort of a contagious experience where you look down the hall or across the organization or to another location even, that they say, hey, you know, we have similar challenges. I wonder if this can help us. And oftentimes, most often, actually, the answer is yes. So we look forward to beginning your digital transformation with these two business applications, AP automation and expense management, but certainly understand that the conversation doesn't always end there and often continues to other areas of the business. So let's talk briefly about why it's important to do anything. Why go down this digital transformation path? And as many of you are probably aware, there are many reasons. Certainly the fact that paper, as we look at the box that's displayed on the screen, paper is expensive, but not only because of the cost of the paper itself, but also because each one of those pieces of paper in that box and every other one that comes into your organization is typically copied, printed, shared, scanned up to 10 times per page. So in addition to what you pay for the actual paper, you're also paying to have it reproduced. I was talking to a client last week that they said, yeah, our process before we started using you guys was that we would receive an email, we would print the document that was attached to it, we would scan it back in and email it to somebody else. They would print it and put their notes on it, then they would scan it back in and email it to somebody. By the time it came back, it had been scanned and uploaded and emailed 4 or 5 different times, and that's just one scenario. On average, research shows that that happens about 10 times per document across organizations. So if you can relate to that, chances are it's time to really look at an automation system. Now, the other factor in that is that when you need to find that information, when you need to find that documentation, you are currently, and your team is currently getting up out of their desk and running down the hall and looking for information that's buried in filing cabinets and boxes and even off-site storage many times. And so some of the data points that I'm sharing with you on the screen now really support the fact that there are so many more costs besides, again, the cost of the paper, the cost of reproducing the paper, but the time spent and the lack of efficiency in your organization that comes from having paper manual-based process really, really does add up. In fact, research suggests that the average employee, especially in finance and accounting, where there tend to be a lot of paper in those organizations, in those departments, spend 30 to 40% of their time looking for information in email and file cabinets and offsite storage and boxes and the like. So there's a significant time savings that comes from having documents available at your fingertips. In the lower left-hand corner, another point of consideration, 22%, the percent by which paper is growing every year. So in other words, in about 3 years, the amount of paper in your organization will double. If you're a larger organization, then that number is going to happen even faster. That number is going to double even faster. And then if we look at the upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand corner, the 70% number, which I jumped straight to the 30%, so I'm going to go back to the 70%. This is a number that's hard for us to digest because 70% of businesses would fail within 3 weeks, according to many, many studies that support this, if they were at a loss for the documents in their business due to fire, flood, or some other natural disaster. Certainly, if you store your documents in an off-site location, this can also be a factor because you need to have that most times for audit purposes and other business reasons for 3, 5, 7 years in many cases is what our clients experience. So if you would put your business at risk for losing your documents, that's probably not a chance that you would be willing to take. And then finally, in the lower right-hand corner, that number, $125. Now, I haven't yet met a company who has a line item on their budget for this, and if you do, that's great, but it's definitely something that you should consider in building your business case for why going digital, why transforming your business. The reality is that $125 is the cost of a misfiled document within a typical organization. And so when you think about the time that adds up and the inefficiencies and the frustration of potentially the vendor, the partner, the employee, the consultant, whoever it is that's chasing that document and looking for the information or a payment status, a partner update, a contract update, whatever that might be, $125 is the cost if that document has been misfiled or lost. If you have to go back to the source to have it recreated, that number jumps to $350 to $400 per document. Again, I haven't met anybody yet who has that line item in their budget, but the reality is that according to additional research, a document is lost every 12 seconds within most organizations. So certainly you can see how that would add up over time. Now, I have to do a little bit of a flashback here because nobody wants this. When you look at the fact that there are offices that still contain many, many filing cabinets and boxes and areas around the business that you think, you know, I could be putting people to work in those spaces. I could be making much better use of this space if it were a productivity center instead of a file storage room. So certainly there's an office space element that comes into place as well, no pun intended. So we want to avoid that. So now that we have a picture of why we should begin our digital transformation, let's talk about how we can go down that path. So when clients come to Quicktag, they usually come with any number of problems, but they usually start with what I'll call the paper problem, which is what we kind of just covered within the cost of the paper itself, and then of course the lack of ability to find things and visibility into documents when they're in a process, let's say AP automation, for example. So we need to first capture those documents digitally as early as possible in the process. So that's step one that we can address right away, and we'll take a look at several examples of how to do that. Step two is integrate with the systems that are going to be most commonly used and most commonly affected by those that are managing these documents. We find this often to be the accounting team, the finance team, the HR team, and the like. So certainly it's important to integrate with the systems, and what I'm going to demonstrate for you is the ability to do that specifically within Dynamics GP. And then finally, the ability to automate. The more manual steps you can cut out of any process for sure, but certainly ones that require multiple levels of human interaction and or approval, much like the AP process and expense management process, the more manual steps you can cut out of those, obviously the more efficiency you're going to gain, but also the less stress of running around the office chasing documents, and then having that knowledge that this information is at your fingertips. You don't need to search all over the office and certainly other storage locations to find things. Not to mention the audit and compliance that it's going to accelerate. We have clients tell us that audits used to take months, and now they're done in a matter of less than a couple of weeks because they can give the auditor a temporary license, they log in, they look up checks, invoices, vendors, payments, expense reports, whatever it is, and they're easily able to find this information and trail through every step of who did what along the way. So we capture the documents as early as possible in the process. We integrate with your ERP system, in this case Dynamics GP, and we automate the processes that are going to be most critical for gaining these efficiencies. And again, we're going to start with AP and expense management. So with that, I'm going to jump over into my demo environment and just switch screens here. Give me 1 second. And we will make a little update here to the screen sharing situation. And now you should see my Dynamics GP. So what I'm going to show you first is that ability to capture and integrate. So this screen should look very familiar to any of you who are in the GP world, in the accounting team most likely, certainly as sometimes approvers and finance managers as well, you could be in here, but we're going to focus specifically on the AP user as the first point of contact with GP within Quicktag. So, Quicktag within GP. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at this additional menu up here where we have the option to tag, view, and search documents. This comes automatically when you have the Quicktag connector for document management. I'm going to show you how it works. We're just going to find a quick voucher here. I'm going to pull up one of my favorites, and I'm going to use one that I have lots and lots of documents attached to. And the value of looking at one with a lot of documents is that you kind of get the point that there isn't a limit to the number of documents that you can associate with a given transaction. So what I'm talking about when I say capture is that we can add documents to this particular transaction in GP using Quicktag, and then at any point in time when I want to view these documents, you notice I clicked additional view documents as that step, I now see that I've got all of these different files. I've got PDFs and emails, some of which probably have attachments. I've got Word documents. I could have Excel spreadsheets. I could have any number of file types as I look at this particular transaction. So the option to add additional documents to that is just as easy as the ability to view them. We go back to the additional menu, and we're going to tag a couple of new documents together. So let's just say we have a packing slip that gets sent in after this transaction has been processed. So we can put a comment there if we want to or not. And then I simply browse out to my desktop or network share or whatever I have access to from this device. And I say, yes, I want to associate that document with this transaction in GP. So Quicktag says, okay, great, I'm going to associate that with you. Now let's say, some time has passed and somebody else sends an email in that says, here's the approval from that was, 2 steps ago, or there was a change to the order, or we need to associate this email that's got this supporting documentation, an attached document, let's just say, with that transaction as well. So I can drag this entire email. We'll go back to additional tag documents. I'm just going to put email update. I'm going to drag this entire email, attachment included, over to my tag box in Quicktag right through GP. And now Quicktag is saying, do you want to associate this document with this transaction? I say yes. So even though there's an attachment to this document, that's going to come with the email, be part of what was stored and associated with that transaction. And if there were multiple attachments, they would all be part of that same message. So now when I come back to additional view documents, we'll see that we have some more files added. But let me just show you, for example, when you do have to go back and open this email, you could delete that email out of your inbox or your personal email folder. It is always going to be stored and associated with this transaction in GP, and it's going to be stored in Quicktag. So even if I needed to come back and open an attachment to that email, that too is going to be stored in Quicktag. Okay, so all of these documents are going to be available to you. Now, another common scenario, and again, this is still part of the capture story, right? This is the make the paper go away, get rid of the file cabinets, get rid of the boxes, and just get our paper and our documents into Quicktag and associated with GP transactions. Here's a scenario that we hear all the time, that somebody calls and says, hey, I need to find this document. Well, certainly, if you know what transaction it's associated with, that's great. That's easy. You can pick it, you can find it, you can email it straight from here. But what happens when you have no idea where that document was? You don't remember what transaction ID it was. You don't have the recollection, perhaps even who it was that you ordered that from. Let's say somebody over in sales and marketing calls and says, hey, we need to get some additional tablets for, we're going to be hiring some people and doing a trade show pretty soon. We need to order some more of those. Can you tell me who we ordered from and how we have to get them? And, is there anybody in particular that I need to get approval from? How long does it take to order? All these types of questions come into play. And of course, instead of getting up and running around the building looking for that documentation, hoping you can find the right invoice or the right purchase transaction, you can simply come into GP through Quicktag and do a search for, again, additional search right on the tab there. We did a search for tablet because we're doing a content search. We're looking in every one of those files that has the word tablet, because of course we're scanning all of that and making it available to you. And then Quicktag returns these results and says, hey, I've got several that meet that criteria in this date range, and here's where they are. Here's the Quicktag drawer that they're associated with, along with the barcode of the of the document. So you can easily see the type of transaction that they're associated with, and then you can just open the file right here. And certainly you can take a look to make sure that's it. Yep, oh, here they are. There's the tablet cases. That's what we need to get. And we'll go ahead and send this straight to the person that requested, because we integrate directly with Outlook, straight from the Quicktag connector in GP as well. And we will just send these along their way. And, you know, say, Mary, here you go. Here's your tablets information. And then, now I didn't have to get up. I didn't have to look for anything. And I can get back to work. It didn't disrupt my flow of business because I'm already in GP. I'm already connected to Quicktag, which is my core document management system. So it's already taken care of it for me. I don't need to do anything else. Get back to work. So I can close this transaction. Certainly I could search for things based on the metadata, you know, the vendor, the document number if I happen to know it, or any other sort of information that's been captured here. But I can also search for content. That's one of the things that makes Quicktag unique in the market as well, is that you can search for that content and find it even without doing any additional extraction. You can search and easily find and share that information. So that's kind of the quick and simple tag, view, search. That's the capture story. That's the make the paper go away. If you're already creating your transactions in GP and you need the ability to associate documents, multiple documents many times, regardless of file format, or if they're associated with an email, and or search and find and share them with other people in your organization. So Quicktag enables you to do that very simply here. And certainly one thing to note as well, if you're considering the difference between having a document management platform and trying to use, say, the document attach features that are native to the system, that search and find and share feature is really, really valuable in this, because not only are these documents easy for you to find based on the content, they are also not taking up any space in your GP database. They are stored in Quicktag separately. So you're not going to run into issues like I ran out of resources or my database is corrupt because I'm trying to, you know, store too many documents in there instead of having my financial transactions. So Quicktag is a separate system, a separate database that comes to life through the connection that we establish inside of GP on the additional menu. So tag, view, search, that's kind of the capture story of being able to get rid of the paper. So that's step one, and certainly highlights the integration within GP. Now, this transaction that we're looking at, I could have just as easily, you know, created manually, but I didn't. I actually had this transaction routed because the document came into Quicktag first and ended in the payables transaction create. So that's the step that we're going to take a look at together now. So we're going to have all of these invoices come in to a central source. We're going to send them into Quicktag. Let's say your vendors are sending you PDFs today. Let's say they're sending in their invoices today. Chances are they're sending them into either an AP inbox or they're sending them to a person on the AP team. And what happens when that person's on vacation or out sick or isn't available for whatever reason to handle her inbox, his or her inbox for the day? Well, right now they probably wait until that person returns to the office. When they come into Quicktag, however, they will come into a common experience, a common queue, if you will, and whoever has access to the AP work queue is going to be presented with these invoices that are ready to be processed. Now, what I'm showing you in this experience is the Quicktag GP professional client. Let me take a step back and show you what I mean by that and how I know what to do with these documents. Well, when I log into the GP Pro client, I'm given several different options here. You can see that I can tag documents, I can edit documents, or I can approve documents. Now, I'm an AP user in this role, so I come in the morning, let's pretend I'm the AP manager. I come in the morning. In days gone by, I would come in the morning to a stack of invoices on my desk, sometimes ones that needed to be even opened from the mail, sometimes they've been opened, and then I've got a whole nother set that's been sent to me in an email. So I've got to check my personal email, I've got to check the mailroom, I've got to check what's on my desk, and believe me, I've lived this before, I know it's not fun. And when you start your day that way, you first have to kind of get organized and understand what you need to do with each one of those documents that are either sitting on your desk or in your inbox. So we've organized them for you quite nicely here with tag as the first step. That's typically what you would equate to the indexing step within GP. But we're going to enable you to do that straight away from Quicktag here using the GP Pro client. And you'll see why we call it the Pro client in just a second. You can see I've got some receipts and such there as well. because I could use this for other kind of products and processes. However, in this stage, we're going to take a look specifically at the AP experience. So now all of our vendors are sending in their invoices to the same inbox, the same email address. And if, of course, I received some paper still, I would scan them in. They would come into the same place, okay? So I right-click on this list here and say, okay, this is the invoice that I want to process. ImageMakers just called me and they said, hey, where's our payment? We sent those to you 3 years ago. What's going on? And so I really need to get this payment taken care of. So I right-click and I'm given some options for different workflows that I might take with this particular invoice. Now, I'm going to show you the one with, it's a new invoice, and I'm going to do an approver selection, meaning I know that the head of marketing is who needs to approve the ImageMaker advertising invoice. So I have my list on the left, and I have my image displayed on the right, so I know exactly what to do with it when I come to this stage. So when I select that workflow option, it's going to open for me a screen. I'm just going to hop back to GP and create this, give you this sense of why we call it the Pro Client and what this experience is like. We modeled this layout very specifically after the GP payables transaction entry. And I have to tell you that our clients really, really appreciate that because they have very little training to do in this situation as a result, because people look at it and they go, yep, we got it. There's a real-time connection to GP here. I just selected 2 pieces of information from drop-down lists that were natively integrated to GP. I selected the company ID. Oh, by the way, if you manage multiple GP companies, instead of in the GP experience where you have to log out and log back in for each company that you'd like to access, right here within Quicktag, you can select that company from the company ID, and all of the data will populate from that. All the vendors that are associated with it, the GL structure, etc., will be available to you. So you don't have to log out and log back in. You can select those straight away from looking at the invoice as you're doing this initial indexing step. So when I did my selections there, I grabbed my company ID. I did a lookup from the vendor ID, again, just like you would have in GP. And then now all I need to do is copy and paste the invoice number over here and the amount. And I could copy and paste, or I could 10-key it. And again, I used to be an AP manager. I'm certainly going to 10-key because that's way faster. And then I'm going to look at the distributions. Now you noticed if you blinked, you might not have seen, but you notice that this took like a half a second to display. And the reason for that is what we're doing is a real-time lookup in GP on the vendor card for ImageMakers advertising to see if there are vendor defaults for the GL codes. And of course, in this case, we see that there are. If there are vendor defaults here, we'll pull those straight into your GL distribution. So no additional data entry or lookups are required. Now, of course, you could add another payables line. You could change the account that it's coming out of. All of those things are options for you. Let's also talk for a moment about the additional functionality that's enabled for you here. If you have accounts that are analytical accounting enabled, for example, those would also be accessible for you, the dimensions you could add right here. If you are using native GP intercompany transactions, just like the little checkbox at the top of the GP payables transaction entry, you see intercompany at the top of this display window as well. If that were enabled, this company ID field would also be enabled so that you could set up your due to, due from, and payable transaction. Same thing for a binary stream. We would enable that payment as well, and also show you the corresponding company ID if there was one there, and also key to act. If you use key to act and need to track job cost associated with invoices, we would enable that for you here as well. So several different functions that come to life within the GL distribution grid while you're still in Quicktag and looking at the invoice so that you can validate how it needs to be processed. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and select an approver because we've done our very minimal, data entry. Let's call it what it is. I mean, I put in a dollar amount. Everything else was copy and paste and select from a lookup. So that only took a couple of seconds. But now let's make it even easier for next time. Let's say I get this ImageMakers advertising invoice once a quarter because we order banners for them every time we do a new trade show. So every time I get one, I want the data entry to be the same. I know I'm going to order the same amount. They're going to be the same cost. And if it was a different cost, of course, I could change it. I'm going to save this as a template. So we're going to call it ImageMaker Banners. And now when I save this template, I'm going to submit the invoice for processing in this workflow, of course, but the next time that I come back, and most of our clients do this for high volume vendors, right? The 80-20 rule or the 50-50 rule even. In this case, if 50% of your invoices come from, say, a handful of vendors, or if 80% of your invoices come from 20 vendors, you know, that sort of thing. You're going to want a template for each one of these that are standard, because then the only thing you're really doing is verifying if the amount needs to be updated and certainly any changes to the GL code. But of course, you can do that with a real-time lookup to GP as well. So we make that part very simple as well. So we're going to store this as a template so that next time all of the information is stored for me exactly as I've entered it here, and then there's no risk for there to be any sort of misinterpretation or there errors on the way that the data might be looked up or extracted or that sort of thing. Of course, some people prefer to have OCR on the front end of this, which of course we can accommodate as well. And then most of this information would be populated for you, but there would be potentially a validation step, right? You know, is that an I or a 1 or an L or whatever? Those sorts of things could still come into play. So templates is a way that you can avoid all of that because it's going to be exactly as you entered it. Now, I'm going to click submit, but you're going to see that I'm going to get an error because what we're doing is looking up this document number as well. And this is, again, based on real world experience. Clients need to know, you need to know, is this invoice already in my system? Is it in Quicktag? Is it in GP? Where is it so that I can make the decision? Most people don't want to allow duplicates. So I say, no, I don't want to submit it anyway. I'm going to go ahead and change that because it's not our policy to accept duplicate invoices. So I'm going to put today's date on it to make it a unique document number. So we're going to do that dupe check for you as well. Now when I submit this invoice, it's going to leave the queue of the AP person. And of course that took me 10 times longer than it normally would because we were talking through each one of the steps and the features available and all of that. However, if I was doing it just tab, 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 I'd be done in about 2.5 seconds. You can probably relate when you're going through your PTE screen very quickly, so you understand how that works. However, when you're doing it from an automated standpoint, it goes even faster because most of those data fields are populating for you automatically with the click of a button. And certainly if you're using templates, they're going to populate without doing any data entry or any validation because there's no room for error there. So now we're going to become the approver. So we went from our AP person who has the stack of invoices, in this case in their digital queue, and we routed that invoice. Now Quicktag has routed that invoice for approval to Mary CFO because remember, that's the approver that we selected from the approver dropdown. So we're going to log into what we call Quicktag Anywhere with our CFO credentials, and it's nice when you get to go from AP to CFO just in a day. That's pretty cool, right? So when I come into this experience now, I can see I have a number of documents that are waiting for me to take some sort of action. Well, in this case, I'm not going to look at expense reports just yet. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But the workflow that I'm looking for right now is invoices approver selection. Now, as the CFO, I may or may not know that. I just happen to know that this is the one that we're working with, so that's the one I want to highlight for you. But you can see in my approval essential experience, I've got lots of different documents and document types that I may need to take some sort of action on. So here again, I can quickly see the image display on the right-hand side. I can scroll and get all of the detail that was entered into that transaction if I want to. But what I'm usually looking for is the GL codes and the workflow history. So let's take a look at that. When I click on the GL codes, I'm given all of the information that was pulled straight through from the GP Pro client. This is the step that the accounts payable manager took when they did that initial tag step. And again, if I had any additional GL data here, analytical accounting, intercompany, and the like, all of that would display for me as well. And certainly as an approver, and more importantly, as an auditor at some point in the future, I'm going to want to see this workflow history. So I'm going to get date and timestamp of who did what at each stage. We see very clearly here that Mary did the tag step and it's done. And we're now waiting for Mary CFO to approve. This is the action she needs to take, and it's pending since we see the hourglass is still empty. So we're going to go ahead and close that. And of course, I could get this and say, you know what, this is for a different program budget. I want to delegate this over to somebody else. And so I could be presented with a list of people that I could delegate this to. Maybe it was supposed to come out of somebody else's budget, for example. I could send that along. Or let's say I realized that, you know what, those GL codes weren't correct. I need to send this back to AP and say, AP, please fix. And of course, if I'm going to reject it, I need to tell them why. And so I'd put a little note in there that says the GL codes are needing some adjustment there. In our case, we're going to go ahead and approve it. But before we do that, I wanted to show you one of the other options because this is a very common use case for most of our clients and for us as well. When maybe you noticed a moment ago, we got an email notification that as an approver of these invoices, I get this email that says, hey, this invoice has been routed to you and requires your attention. And it shows me right in the subject line, approval is required here. So I can scroll down. I can certainly see all of the data about the invoice, and I can see even the GL codes and who the approver is and who's waiting for it. Of course, I can open the document because it's attached to the email, and yes, there in fact it is. And I don't know about you, but I'm doing this often in an airport or when I'm waiting in between meetings somewhere, or if I happen to be at home at the end of the day or on a weekend or whatever, and I get these, I can simply reply on my mobile device as well. It's pretty handy. I can just click approve. It's going to create the reply email for me, puts in the word approve, puts in the word thanks, has this workflow message here because it tells the system what to do with it, and all I need to do is click send. So I click approve, I click send, and off it goes. I'm going to go ahead and do the approval through the Quicktag Anywhere experience here on in the web browser, but certainly there's multiple ways that you could manage that approval. And remember, way back at the beginning when we looked at the Pro client, we had the option to approve from there as well. So if your CFO or your final level of approval is someone who's, sitting behind their desk for the most part and is comfortable doing all of that in, in their desktop experience, then of course they could approve there as well. We find most people want to do it either through a web browser or via email. So either case, very easy, very straightforward. In this case, we did it through the web client. So now that we have approved that, now that invoice could have had multiple levels of approval. Potentially there would be a dollar amount threshold is kind of the most common scenario that we see. Maybe AP has access, maybe the AP or finance director has approval authority up to $5,000. And then the department head potentially up to $10,000 or $20,000. But anything over that has to go to the CFO or the CEO or some other final level of approval. All of that can be handled through your workflow as well. So we'll work with you to figure out what that right matrix, what that right workflow level and approval levels are for your organization. Okay, so remember when we talked about the capture story, the make the paper go away, we looked at tag, view, and search on the additional menu that comes to life through Quicktag in GP. Now we're going to take a look at this option down here called View Work Queue. And essentially what that is doing is taking all of the approved documents that have come through from the workflow in Quicktag and said, okay, these invoices, or in this case, expense reports, but again, we'll come back to that in a minute, hang tight. All of these documents have gone through approval. You can rest assured that if they got to this stage in the work queue, in the workflow, they are ready to be created in GP. Now, as a final checkpoint, and if you're a little bit OCD like I am when it comes to this sort of thing, you want to do that last step of validation. You can see that as I hover here, I can see the GL codes. If I right-click here, I can get all of the details. And if I want to view the document, I can do that as well simply by right-clicking and viewing the document. And sure enough, that's the one we've been working with. So what we're going to do now, and of course I could select many at a time, but I'm just going to pick the one that we're working with here. We're going to click Create so that we can put this into either a new batch or an existing batch, or you can have GP create the next available batch for you. So we're just going to do Mary MSDYN and make a new batch. So we're taking that invoice out of our work queue here in the Quicktag connector, and we're going to go back to our payables transaction. And now when we do our lookup, we're going to see our options here. Oh, I put an apostrophe S on the other ones. That was silly of me. Anyway, we'll find this here. Just give me 1 second. There it is. Whoops. There it was. I promise I just saw it. You saw it too, didn't you? There it is. Okay, so we're going to select that transaction and take a look at our GL distributions. They're automatically populated for us through the connector from GP in the final step of the workflow, and the payables transaction is already created for us. And now when I go view document, this document is associated with this transaction in GP, but lives in Quicktag. So let's recap what we did. As accounts payable, we had all of these invoices coming in to our work queue. So in the GP Pro client that looks and feels and functions just like the GP Payables transaction entry screen, although you don't have to log out and log back in, you can just select the company that you're tagging this indexing this invoice for. Do your initial tag step, route it for approval. Multiple ways to approve. We chose the web browser because it's the easiest way to see multiple documents regardless of the file type in one single view. We could approve, reject, or delegate. And in our case, of course, we approved it. And then the final step was to come here to the work queue that comes to life in Quicktag through the GP additional menu and create that payables transaction entry. So even though two different people theoretically are going to be doing that step, AP at the beginning and however many levels of approval in the middle, and then AP again here for this final step, the process is very fluid. You have complete visibility into every step of the process, and once the final create happens, when you come into create your payables batches, most people do that once or twice a week, and they'll select all of the approved invoices and put them into a given batch for payment in that situation. Now, since we're here, I'm just going to come back to, since I mentioned expenses, and we're going to look at that next, but I want to show you that they end in the same way. And what's kind of neat about that is that now when you view the document, if this was an expense workflow, again, we're going to take a look first at the end result, and then we're going to go back and build this so that we can see how we got there. Now the end result is an expense report that Quicktag created, and at this final step of the work queue, we're converting this expense report into a payables transaction, much like the invoices that you just experienced go through that same workflow. So now we're going to take a look at how that happens. So we'll save this transaction and minimize GP, of course, so that we can get back to our Quicktag workflow. And we're logged in here as Mary CFO. So let's just get this out of the way, and we're going to log in as our initial user. So as Mary, I am a business traveler. So if you can relate to that, or if you have a team of either employees or contractors or consultants that are traveling on a regular basis, they would need to collect their receipts. Now, I can tell you in a former life, what that looked like for me was at the end of the week, I would come back and I would dump out my briefcase, and hopefully I would find all of the receipts. And then I would sit down in front of Excel, and after scratching my head and being frustrated for a little while, I would try to organize them and create a line item for each one, hoping that I remembered, to capture all of them, to make sure that I had all of them documented in that Excel spreadsheet. And then I would make a copy of all of those receipts, and I would make a copy of that spreadsheet for myself, and then I would put it in an envelope and mail it to my company headquarters. And then they, once a week, would put it in an envelope and send it inter-office mail to the company global headquarters, which is where expenses got reimbursed out of. So some 2 weeks or so later, I'd get confirmation that, hey, we received your expense report. And then sometime thereafter, whenever they did the next expense batch, I would get a notification that, hey, your expense reimbursement is on its way. So that process could take weeks, sometimes a month or so, sometimes 6 weeks, depending on when in the cycle I happened to submit my receipts and when in the cycle they were from an approval standpoint and where they were from a payment standpoint. So Quicktag recognized that, and many of our customers recognized that that was a very inefficient way to handle expenses. And frankly, most of our customers said, hey, you do this automation thing for our invoices and it's really pretty cool. We handle expenses kind of similarly. Can you do that for this as well? So here's what we did. We created Quick Expense, and much like we get rid of the paper in step 1 for invoices, we now enable for receipts, you take a picture with your phone. So I was just traveling last week. Maybe some of you were there at GPUG at Amplify in Chicago. I take a picture of my coffee receipt with my phone. I email it in straight from my phone because, of course, it's connected to my work email, and they get sent straight into my Quicktag experience. So when I log in now, I come into the Quick Expense site, and I can see that I've got several receipts waiting for me to do something with. So I can simply take a look at that receipt, what it looks like. I can edit it from here. I can do a number of different things with it. So what we'll do in this case is actually tag a new one. So let's just say that I've got some receipts over here. We'll look at our sample documents, and we'll grab a receipt. Here's the one for coffee. Sure, why not? We'll drag and drop it right there. Now I'm looking at this receipt. So again, much like the indexing experience for invoices, I have a very simple user interface here where I have to do a little bit of data entry. We'll just pretend that that was March 1st. It was for coffee. These fields, by the way, can be optional, required. These aren't standard fields. They don't have to be included. These are all at your discretion. You decide what the layout is of what fields are optional, what fields are required, and which ones are going to tie primarily to your GL codes. So this bottom part is where the GL code mapping begins to happen. So we can see here that I put here that it's sales and meals, and then of course I've got the line amount here of $5.55. And I'm done. So the header information about the receipt, very simple. You're looking at it. You can select the date. If you were doing this on behalf of someone, you also get to see the list of people for whom you are authorized to submit expense reports. We get this common scenario where, an admin in an office maybe does the receipts for the department managers, potentially the VPs and that sort of thing. They can email their receipts to him or her, and then that person can do this submission on their behalf. So we make it very simple whether you're doing it for yourself or on behalf of another within your organization. So then I go ahead and I enter this receipt and I'm done. And then I move on to the next one. So in this case, I can be looking at this receipt, and if I want to edit it, of course, I could do that here as well. So that this one's already got some information, so I can go ahead and submit it too. So I've got lots of different ways that, again, I can tag this information and set them up for the next step in the process. Okay, so now the next thing I need to do is create my expense report. Well, remember the scenario I described a moment ago where I was, storing up all my receipts, manually doing my data entry, and, had no visibility into how long it was going to take or when I was going to get reimbursed. What I do now is I just say, pick my date range. I'm not doing it on behalf of anyone, of course, this is mine. And I'm going to put my name in here. We'll put MSDYN so that we can track it. And sure, we'll throw today's date on there, what the heck. So we've given it a name, we put a date range in, we said we want to create a new expense report. I click submit. The two receipts, by the way, that we just tagged were, one was for March 1st, one was for March 23rd. So we grabbed a date range that would include all of them. So now when we come to our expense reports, we're going to see that it's pending. It's actually building it. But there's the one I selected it through the 26th because the other one had the date of the 23rd. We're going to give this just a second to run. We'll do a quick refresh. And Quicktag in that second was going out, finding receipts that were for Mary, that were reimbursable during that time frame. And it built my expense report for me. How cool is that? I don't know about you, but when we started using this system, of course we use it here internally as well, but when we started using this system, I thought this is the best thing since sliced bread because I don't have to create all those line items and expense reports anymore. And many of your employees and partners and vendors and contractors probably feel the same way. So Quicktag pulls together all the receipts that meet that criteria. Again, if somebody else was doing this on behalf of another, you would see that information here, and you would see who the proxy was that actually created the transaction, created the expense report as well. So now we come in and I've reviewed it and everything, so we've taken a look to make sure that it's correct. We're just going to change pending to send. Of course, I could have drilled into any of that detail, made sure I coded them correctly if I needed to. In our case, we took a quick look to review it. We're going to go ahead and submit it. So now, again, much like the approval experience for invoices, Mary as the user, Mary as the traveler, the salesperson who was at an event, has built her expense report, and now that expense report is being routed to Mary Department Manager for approval. So we'll log in as Mary Department Manager and take a look at what that experience is like. So when I come in as Mary Department Manager to Quicktag, I'm going to see my Approval Central experience, and I'll notice that in addition to other invoices or receipts that I might have to deal with as well, I also have this expense report that's just been routed to me for approval. And again, much like the invoice experience, I'll get an email notification. Notice that right down there in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. There's my email notification. Same thing, got an email. I could reply, approve, reject from there as well. And of course, the spreadsheet is attached to that document. Now, what's cool about this experience is that if I'm doing this online through Approval Central, I can drill in and actually look at these receipts and go, okay, what did Mary do? Oh, she had coffee, and it looks like she maybe had lunch. Okay, great. Put gas in the car. Okay, that's probably good. So, so all of those things are acceptable work expenses. Now, if I found something in here that was not acceptable, I could reject these at the line item level or at the overall report level. So in our case, we trust Mary. She did the right thing. She's got a couple of valid work expenses here, so we're going to go ahead and approve this expense report. So let's just say OK to pay, and we'll put MSDYN again so we can track our progress all in this particular experience. And then at the end of that we just looked at together within GP, that transaction is going to be ready for payables transaction creation. So expense reports, invoices, all automated, all through the same system with full visibility into the workflow in the audit trail, as well as the digital documents being created and routed for approval and available for you in one view. So we're going to minimize this and just head over back to our slides for one more second. Let's see, share here, file, there we go. And let's see if this comes back for us automatically. And okay, great, so now we're sharing the screen. So we've taken a look at the demo. We've taken a look at AP automation and expense management, all with a direct integration into Dynamics GP. And now we're going to go back to my WebEx experience. There we go. And just sort of recap with kind of what we've learned there. So something to note about the way that Quicktag integrates with GP is that tag and view and search option that I showed you, that is available for you in 75 different screens within GP. So it's not just limited to the AP experience, but it's across 9 different modules that are native to GP. And oh, by the way, if you happen to encounter, some others that you need to have that document management, document attach feature, tag, view, search from, we can typically customize that for you and just add in the connector as long as it's a native GP screen, and sometimes even when it's not. So certainly don't hesitate to ask if there's other screens that you need to have that document management capture feature enabled for. Again, I mentioned that it's a very light technical footprint. We just integrate with GP. We don't take up any GP resources. It's a separate Quicktag server. And what's most appealing to the AP experience from a workflow standpoint is that the look and feel as we took a look at the Pro client is exactly like the experience of being in the payables transaction entry screen. So there's no learning curve for your team, and they really get up to speed very, very quickly. And of course, it scales to other departments across organizations because it doesn't have to begin and end with AP or even expense management. Forms for things like time off requests or rideshare requests or other medical benefits, compliance, training, HR forms, you name it. If it's a document that needs to be routed for approval and managed in a central source and accessible to individuals in your organization, chances are Quicktag has either seen it or done it or is able to tailor a solution for your organization if those are your needs. Okay, and so it's easy for you then to find those documents from within GP or within Quicktag. And that's the thing, we looked at the search and find within GP, but those users, what if they weren't GP users and they needed to find those documents? The auditor scenario, for example, or a manager of a different department that was responsible for the budget. So those people can find documents in Quicktag even if they're not GP users. And our licenses, by the way, are not tied to GP. That's a question we get asked quite frequently, so I thought I'd just let you know that right away. And of course, you can add documents to transactions at any time and make them accessible in one click. So here's just a few examples of other areas of the business, other departments, as it were, that can be automated with Quicktag. A lot of times I mentioned our clients start with AP automation and certainly expense management. HR forms is often sort of a next scenario that comes into play. We have also customers who use it for contractor onboarding, legal contracts, sales order automation. So again, if you can think of it as a document that needs to be routed through your organization and managed and visible and accessible to people, having a complete audit trail, then chances are Quicktag can do it. And in many cases, we probably already have. So don't limit your thinking about this to one particular area of the business. So we can automate any process. And I like to share our what we call our family snapshot, because there's something important to note here, that the Quicktag customers, we've been doing this for 21 years, and in our experience with Quicktag customers, there is no right or wrong shape, size, industry, location, or anything of that. Number of departments, number of locations, they all seem to start with the same challenge that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, and that is They have a paper problem. They have too much paper in their organization. They don't have visibility into their processes, and things take too long and cost too much, and people get frustrated with that. So the reality is that they all fundamentally have the same issue, and while they represent many different industries, certainly you can see that there are companies here that are of all shapes and sizes and industries: healthcare, financial services, insurance, professional services, retail, manufacturing, distribution, or kind of to name the top few. But again, it's a very horizontal issue and therefore a very horizontal solution. So if you can relate to that, chances are we can work with you to help find a solution. So as I advance here, there we go. Some of the benefits that people see, as you probably could relate this scenario just as well as I can by the end of this conversation. You know that your productivity is going to increase. All that time at the beginning that we talked about wasting, and the efficiency that they're going to gain by having automation and quick visibility, certainly our customers see. That leads to them getting to a point of ROI, usually within 6 to 12 months. So it's very quick to pay for itself as well. Invoices are processed faster. Your vendors, even in some cases, can get paid faster. You can start taking advantage of early pay discounts, things like that. And of course, finance managers have visibility into the entire process, and audit and compliance, as I mentioned examples earlier, certainly take much less time to meet, and you've got all of the visibility at your fingertips. And a couple of notes just about Imagetag, that we have been in business, as I mentioned, for 21 years. We were the first ISV in this space to integrate so deeply with the Microsoft Dynamics systems. In fact, we were the first to do it within the Dynamics ERP systems to begin with. And over the 21 years we've been in business, we've expanded to all 4 of the primary ERP suites within the Microsoft Dynamics channel, and that is, of course, GP, SL, NAV, and AX. And during our 21 years, we've also gained 120,000 business users around the globe. So we have a very strong customer base representing those industries that I just mentioned a moment ago. And they are all supported right here 100% in our Tempe, Arizona location. And as I mentioned, it doesn't start and stop with AP or expense management. Quicktag can literally help you automate any business process. So a few of the technology integrations, I highlighted a couple of them during the course of the demonstration. Certainly Key to Act, Binary Stream, Advance if you're specifically in the agriculture space, and of course our OCR solution. So with that, I am going to try to connect with a few of the questions here. I don't know, Adam, if you could jump back on. I did see a few coming in during the course of the session, but if we could address a couple of those now, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and once again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just type them into the Q&A box and we'll get to all of them. Question that came in, do you integrate with any Dynamics GP third-party packages?
Mm-hmm. So if by that you mean things like Binary Stream, Key to Act, DirectLogic, Paramount, all of those things, yes. So if you're using another solution potentially for requisition creation, PO creation, if you're using Binary Stream for multi-entity management, Key to Act for job cost, those are a few examples. So yeah, absolutely. We have an open API SDK that we can provide for somebody that maybe has a little bit of a unique scenario and needs something above and beyond those that are standard for us as well. So yeah, great question. Thank you.
Here's another one. Is Quicktag available in a cloud environment?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the way that Quicktag is implemented is right next to wherever your GP server is. So we will ship you a Quicktag server image that you'll just stand up a VM in the same environment where GP is, and then we establish our connector to enable that integration. So if GP lives in the cloud, then Quicktag will live in the cloud right alongside it. If Quicktag lives on-prem, if GP lives on-prem, then Quicktag will live there as well. So it can live wherever GP is hosted and managed.
Here's another question. If the vendor invoice is for inventory, how does the approver look for the PO receipt transaction in GP?
Mm-hmm. So let's certainly have a demo request follow-up on that question. Be happy to show you what that looks like. So the way that we do that is we basically tie together all of the documentation for a purchase order process, the PO, the receiving transaction, and then when the invoice arrives. And then, of course, if the invoice doesn't match, you can route it for what we call exception approval, because if it doesn't match, you do need somebody to take a look and make a business decision about that. But certainly let's have a a tailored conversation, and we can walk through a demo of that specifically with you as well.
Another question, what's the pricing structure for Quicktag?
So there's kind of three elements, and the first is the capture platform that enables that tag view search that we took a look at together right inside of GP. The capture platform is kind of the first element. It's the core document management system. It gives you access to all of the sites and drawers that correspond to all of those GP screens, and that's kind of step one. On top of that, there is the workflow platform that if you do decide to automate a process, AP expense management or otherwise, you need to have the workflow engine so that the rules can be configured and the logic actually executes. That's what supports the workflow. And then there's the software and licenses that kind of go with that. So then it's just a matter of, do I want to automate AP? Do I want to automate expense? And what type of users do I have for that? Are they AP users, or are they the approver experience that we looked at together in the web client? So there's three different components: the platform, the capture platform, the workflow platform, and then the software application and licenses as well. So there's those components, and we would customize that. We would walk through a very specific discovery when we understand your needs, and then we could put together a quote for which components of each of those solutions that you need.
Someone's asking if there's a way to download the session for their management to review the features of Quicktag. Yes, we'll send you a link to view the session on demand probably in the next day or so. And Miriam, you can follow up with this person offline as well.
Absolutely, happy to.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, let's see if any other questions come in. We'll just give people a few seconds to kind of collect their thoughts. All right, here's a question. What's the turnaround time if we purchase Quicktag?
So again, there's kind of a two-part question to that, and two-part answer to that rather, and that is, again, if you go with Quicktag Capture, which is the tag view search functionality inside of GP, but also gives people access to Quicktag online. That's a very quick implementation. We're usually done in 3 to 5 business days and up and running less than a week, fully tested and implemented. Once you make the decision to go with an accounts payable or expense management, a workflow solution, then we, in addition to the capture platform, we still get that up and running within the week for you, but then we take the time to work through your approval matrix and your logic and your workflow requirements, and if you've got additional locations, how does that factor in? So we really go through a fully scoped process for you, with you, to determine that, and so that process can take another few weeks to get everything right, and then the implementation usually takes somewhere between 30 to 90 days, 30, 60, 90 days, again, depending on the responsiveness, the testing time, the feedback, and frankly, it usually comes down to how available can the resource on your team be when they're, when they need to provide this information. So we certainly understand that you have a day job that you have to fulfill as well, so it's kind of doing it hand in hand. So the workflow solution can take 30, 60, 90 days, again, depending on availability. The capture platform can be installed in less than a week, and you'll be up and running using it right away.
Let's see if any other questions come in.
These have been great questions. Good discussion.
Absolutely, I agree. Someone's saying they're very keen to see how this use case incorporates analytical accounts as well. I think that's something that you'll probably have to take offline too, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Happy to demo that for you on a separate session.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. All right, doesn't look like any more questions are coming in, so why don't we end there. Thanks everybody for attending, and Mary, thanks so much for a great presentation.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks everyone for your time today, and certainly let us know if you have other questions.
Great. Thanks, everyone.